The following program is a work of satire and is intended for entertainment purposes only. No identification with actual persons, living or deceased, places, buildings, or products is intended or should be inferred. There are some men who believe that the past is fixed, immutable, filed away neatly in records preserved in ink, sealed beneath the quiet authority of time. Thomas Martin was one such man, until the day the past began returning his correspondence. Beside the narrow gray house at the edge of the small New England town of Ashwick, the cemetery Thomas Martin created for his family began to uncover secrets, not in bones, but in contradictions, a place where Martin, the undertaker and genealogist long devoted to the orderly documentation of death, suspected that death itself may now be documenting him. Harold Finch, grave digger by trade, returned to the cemetery the next morning. He had little to say, for he had seen too much already. The previous day's work had fractured whatever assumption he once held about the natural order of things. Yet, reluctant as he was, Finch, like most men, was persuaded by money and the curiosity of what might come next. "You want 'em all torn up?" Finch asked. "All," Martin replied. So with careful efficiency, Finch dug and Martin watched. What they found beneath each headstone was both shocking and predictable. One by one, when each gravesite was excavated, it revealed a coffin. Each coffin was identical in construction to Martin's coffin, oak, polished, preserved beyond reason. Each had a nameplate engraved with Martin's relative's name on it and their date of birth. Each coffin corresponded exactly to the headstone above it, and each coffin, as far as Finch was concerned, should not exist. With great care and attention to detail, Finch exhumed them all 37. Martin's backyard was no longer pristine. What had once been an orderly arrangement of symbolic graves was now a marred landscape of destruction. 37 new open wounds in the earth, each revealing the same impossible truth. A coffin beneath every stone, a burial without a burial, a record without an origin. As daylight descended into darkness, Thomas Martin prepared to bring the caskets indoors. When the moon rose, the yard was empty of its contents. The coffins had been removed, transported, delivered on Finch's trailer to Martin's morgue. The basement space, once sufficient for the modest needs of a small-town funeral home, now faced an impossible logistical dilemma. 37 coffins, 37 impossibilities, and nowhere to put them all. Thomas Martin considered the problem with characteristic calm. Space, after all, is merely a matter of arrangement, said Martin. Within hours, he found his solution. The embalming room was cleared. Preparation tables were removed, instruments relocated, cabinets emptied. The refrigeration drawers, normally reserved for individual bodies, were left untouched. Out of necessity, Martin invented a vertical storage system. Using reinforced steel racks salvaged from storage shelving and mortuary transport frames, he set up tiered compartments along the walls. Each rack was designed to hold a coffin lengthwise, stacked 3 levels high, like books upon a shelf. It was not elegant, but it was precise, and precision was sufficient. By midnight, all 37 coffins were arranged within the room, ordered, cataloged, accessible. Thomas Martin dismissed Finch at the door. "You will not be needed further," he said. Finch hesitated. "You sure about that?" "Yes," said Martin. "Send me your bill." With a sigh of relief, Finch looked past Martin down into the basement where the neatly stacked coffins rested in unnatural silence. "You ever think," Finch said slowly, "that maybe some things aren't meant to be dug up?" Thomas Martin replied, "Everything is meant to be understood." Finch took leave, and now Thomas Martin was alone for a family reunion. "At last the investigation can proceed," said Martin. Martin's order of operations was calculated, methodical. He began with the most recent, the most personal to him. The 5 coffins resulting from that Thanksgiving dinner, the event that marked not only the completion of several lives, but the expansion of his genealogical tree. He retrieved the first coffin, his mother's, placed it upon the table, the same table upon which countless bodies had been prepared for burial, but this time the existence of a corpse is in question. Thomas Martin opened the lid and paused, because unlike the moment he opened his own coffin the day before, he saw something inside this one, not flesh, not bone, but objects, artifacts, 2 of them, carefully arranged within the otherwise pristine interior. Martin leaned closer. The first was unmistakable. It was a knife from his own silverware set, the same silverware set he used to serve his family on that fateful Thanksgiving day when he poisoned them several months ago. So familiar, polished steel, familiar weight, a small imperfection on the handle. The second item, a letter, folded, unsealed, postmarked. Martin lifted it with a steady hand, examined the handwriting, his handwriting, the ink from the same gel pen he always used. The phrasing, "My dear mother." It was the Thanksgiving invitation, the very one he had handwritten, the very one he had sent, the very one that should exist nowhere but in memory. And yet, there it was, inside a coffin that should not exist, inside a grave that was never dug for burial. Thomas Martin stood very still. "This is incorrect," he said softly. But the words carried less conviction than ever before, because the evidence was no longer abstract. It was tangible, physical, verifiable. He left the morgue, ascended the stairs, crossed into his home, and walked directly into the dining room, the buffet, the drawer. He opened it, counted, 12 knives in the set. No! He counted again, only 7, 5 missing. He closed the drawer slowly and returned to the basement. And now, it is time for us to take a brief respite and listen to an intermezzo conceived by world-renowned composer E. Dudek, after which the saga of Thomas Martin will continue. We continue. The air in the morgue felt different now. He approached the next coffin, his father's. He opened it, the same, a knife, the letter of invitation. His brother's, the same. His older sister's, the same. His younger sister, the same. 5 coffins, 5 confirmations. 5 impossible collections of evidence linking the act, the dinner, the decision, to the aftermath now unfolding before him. Thomas Martin stepped back. The room seemed smaller now, more confined, as though the presence of these objects, these fragments of reality, had reduced the available space for denial. "This is not a coincidence," he said to himself. And now for the first time he absolutely believed it, because coincidence does not retrieve lost objects. Coincidence does not preserve ink. Coincidence does not construct coffins and bury them in undisturbed earth. No, this is something else, something surreal, something beyond human cognition. Thomas Martin turned slowly, looking at the rows of coffins. 37, 5 opened, 32 remaining, each one a sealed statement, each one a potential revelation. And now a question, what will they contain? Because the first 5 have shown him something profound. They do not contain bodies. They contain evidence, artifacts of action, tokens of causality, proof not merely of death, but of how death was brought about. This raised an unsettling possibility. These coffins were not documenting the end of life. They were documenting responsibility, Martin's responsibility. Martin's breath slowed. His mind, ever structured, began assembling a new framework. If the coffins contain evidence, then they are not graves. They are records. If they are records, then they are not passive. They are active. And if they are active, then something is creating them, not after the fact, but alongside it, or perhaps even ahead of it. Martin approached another coffin. He stopped, but did not open it. Not yet, because now there is reason for hesitation, a new and unfamiliar variable in Thomas Martin's otherwise precise existence, uncertainty. Because whatever lies within the remaining 32 coffins may not merely confirm his genealogical tree, it may redefine it. He looks once more at the open coffins, the knives, the letters, the undeniable connection between his actions and their presence in his morgue. Then he looks at his own coffin, still empty, still waiting, wondering what evidence will be placed inside when his record is complete. The room was silent, as though the coffins themselves were aware of his realization, as though they are waiting for him to continue, to open them, to inspect them, to understand, because until this moment, Thomas Martin spent his entire life believing that death is an endpoint, a final entry, a completed record. But now he sees that death may not be the end of the story, only the beginning of its documentation, and that documentation is far more thorough than he ever imagined. 32 coffins remain, 32 records yet to be examined, 32 truths waiting beneath polished lids, and somewhere among them perhaps the explanation he seeks, or the judgment he deserves. But that is a matter for his ongoing examination. The next opening, the next descent into a system that no longer belongs to him, because Thomas Martin is no longer the keeper of records. He is part of them, and the inventory is not yet complete. Here Martin stands in his quiet basement, filled with coffins that should not exist in a world where actions leave behind more than memories, where every deed is cataloged with impossible precision. We find ourselves once again in a place where logic bends, where certainty dissolves, and where every answer leads to a more unsettling question. A place where the dead do not rest, they testify, and the living are merely awaiting their turn on platform number 1 on the next train bound for the Conflation Station.